Arben Kola was just another Albanian immigrant on the streets of New York, until fear and ambition turned him into the most ruthless mafia leader the East Coast had ever seen. Please subscribe and share for daily new update of gang crime story and watch till end. Arben Kola stepped off the plane at JFK Airport, carrying nothing but a small suitcase and the weight of ambition. The city stretched before him like a living maze of opportunity and danger, a place where dreams could be built or destroyed in a single night. Coming from Tirana, Albania, Arben had witnessed poverty, corruption, and survival as a daily battle. But he was determined that his life in America would be different. He had no intention of working ordinary jobs or living in obscurity. Instead, he had eyes on a world most people only glimpsed in whispers, the world of power, money, and influence that operated in the shadows. Within weeks, Arben learned quickly that New York streets ran on connections and fear. He started small, taking odd jobs, observing people and listening. Every interaction became a lesson. He noticed how certain men commanded respect without raising their voices, how a single glance or gesture could shift alliances, and how fear often spoke louder than threats. Arben was careful, blending in when necessary, avoiding attention while mentally mapping the networks that held the city's underworld together. His sharp mind allowed him to spot patterns others overlooked. He saw the rivalries, the betrayals, and the unspoken rules that governed illegal operations, and he began to imagine how he could carve out a place for himself. Arben's first forays into criminal activity were cautious. He partnered with minor groups in Queens, helping with small-scale smuggling, loan collections, and underground gambling. He earned a reputation as someone who could be trusted to follow through, and who could also make difficult problems disappear without hesitation. Word spread quietly. This newcomer was clever, fearless, and had a presence that demanded respect. Arben did not boast or show off. He understood the value of patience. While others rushed into danger seeking quick gains, he observed, planned, and waited for the right moment. One night, while walking through a dimly lit street in Brooklyn, he noticed a dispute between two local gangs. The fight was petty, but chaotic, and one of the leaders made a mistake that exposed his vulnerability. Arben's mind raced as he watched. This was not just a fight, it was an opportunity. He began reaching out to key figures, making connections, and subtly positioning himself as a problem solver. Those who needed a solution or a threat neutralized soon found themselves in Arben's orbit. People started to notice that when Arben Kola involved himself, things changed, often to the advantage of those willing to align with him. By the end of his first year, Arben had transitioned from a newcomer with ambition to a man quietly influencing small operations. He had learned the delicate balance of respect, fear, and loyalty. Each step he took was calculated, each move measured. The city was a chessboard, and Arben was already planning his opening gambits. What no one realized yet was that his ambitions went far beyond petty hustles. In the shadows of New York, a new force was emerging, one that would eventually reshape the Albanian Mafia's presence in America. Arben Kola had arrived, and the streets would never be the same. Arben Kola had spent months learning the rhythm of the city, observing its people, and quietly building his connections. He had grown from a newcomer into someone who understood the power dynamics that ruled the streets. But it wasn't enough to simply exist. Arben wanted control. His first true test came unexpectedly when he discovered that a rival gang had been exploiting Albanian immigrants in Queens. They were charging exorbitant protection fees, threatening families who had no one to defend them. Arben had witnessed too many injustices in his life to ignore this. He decided that this would be his first real strike, a statement to the city that he was no longer just a shadow in the background. He studied the rival gang carefully, noting their routines, weaknesses, and internal tensions. The leader, a man named Victor Haksa, was arrogant and careless, relying on fear rather than strategy to maintain his influence. Arben realized that Victor's overconfidence was his greatest vulnerability. Over several weeks, he orchestrated a plan that was precise and calculated, designed to remove Victor without drawing attention to himself. He coordinated with trusted allies, ensuring that every step of the operation minimized risk while maximizing impact. The night of the strike was quiet and tense. Arben moved like a shadow, blending with the darkness, while his allies executed their roles with precision. By the time the operation was over, Victor was gone, and the remaining members of the rival gang were left in chaos. Arben had not only eliminated a threat, but also sent a clear message. He was a force to be reckoned with. News of the strike spread quickly through the underworld. Those who had dismissed him as inexperienced or insignificant now began to approach him, seeking alliances or protection. Arben had not only removed a rival, he had begun to build a network that would extend his influence far beyond Queens. The aftermath of the strike was a delicate balance. Arben needed to assert control without provoking unnecessary attention from law enforcement or rival gangs. He moved carefully, establishing his operations under layers of secrecy. Small businesses, gambling dens, and loan operations began to operate under his influence, each providing him with both revenue and intelligence. He had learned that power was not just about violence, it was about strategy, timing, and perception. Every action reinforced his reputation as both intelligent and ruthless, a man capable of achieving the impossible without leaving a trace. By the time the dust settled, Arben Kola was no longer just a rising figure. He was a leader in his own right. His first strike had set the stage for the empire he would eventually build. People began to respect him, fear him, and quietly pledge loyalty. Yet even as he celebrated his success, Arben knew this was only the beginning. The city was vast, filled with rival gangs, hidden dangers and opportunities for those bold enough to seize them. The Albanian Mafia in the United States had gained a new leader, one who was patient, calculating, and unafraid of crossing lines that others dared not approach. Arben Kola had made his mark, and the streets would never forget his name. By the early 2000s, Arben Kola had transformed from a rising figure into a force that commanded attention across New York's underground. His first strike against Victor Hux's gang had not only removed a rival, but had opened the door for him to expand his influence. Arben understood that to survive and thrive in the criminal world, it wasn't enough to rely on fear alone. He needed structure, loyalty, and control. Slowly, he began building an empire in the shadows, a network that extended beyond Queens and into other boroughs, each move calculated to increase his power while minimizing exposure. Arben's operations were diverse. Drug trafficking became a cornerstone of his network, but he also controlled loan sharking, underground gambling, and even illicit protection schemes for small businesses. Unlike other gang leaders who acted impulsively, Arben was methodical. He assigned specific roles to trusted lieutenants, ensuring that each part of the operation functioned smoothly. He monitored everything, from the movement of shipments to the behavior of associates, and kept himself insulated from direct involvement. This careful separation made it nearly impossible for law enforcement to trace any illegal activity directly to him. What set Arben apart from other leaders was his ability to inspire loyalty. Members of his organization respected him not only for his ruthlessness, but also for his intelligence and strategic thinking. Unlike many in the criminal world who ruled through fear alone, Arben rewarded loyalty, provided protection, and enforced strict discipline. Betrayal was met with swift and decisive consequences, but those who followed his rules and remained committed found themselves part of something far greater than ordinary gangs. It was a system that blended fear, respect, and opportunity, and it allowed Arben to extend his influence far faster than anyone anticipated. As his empire grew, Arben faced challenges from rival gangs who began to notice his rise. Small conflicts escalated into tense standoffs, each one a test of Arben's ability to outthink his opponents. While others relied on brute force, he relied on strategy and precise timing. By orchestrating distractions, creating alliances, and exploiting rival weaknesses, he neutralized threats without exposing himself. Every move was like a chess piece, carefully positioned to advance his control while keeping potential enemies off balance. The law was aware of him, but they struggled to identify the man behind the operations. Anonymous tips, surveillance gaps, and Arben's ability to operate through intermediaries made him elusive. He had learned early that visibility was dangerous, so he stayed in the shadows, allowing only his reputation to reach the ears of those who might challenge him. People whispered about his intelligence and his unpredictability, but no one could pin him down. He became a ghost in the criminal world, a leader whose influence was felt everywhere, yet whose face was rarely seen. By the end of this period, Arben Kola's name had begun to resonate far beyond the Albanian community. He was no longer just another gang leader. He was the architect of a network that stretched across multiple boroughs, controlling illegal operations with precision and ruthlessness. Each success reinforced his reputation and strengthened his grip on the streets. Yet, as powerful as he had become, Arben knew that the real test was still ahead, keeping control over a sprawling empire while navigating betrayals, law enforcement pressure, and the unpredictable dangers of a world where trust was rare and enemies were always waiting. Arben Kola's empire had grown steadily, and his influence stretched across boroughs, but power often attracts envy. One of his most trusted associates, Luen Shkreli, had been by his side since the early days in Queens. Luen was loyal on the surface, but greed and ambition had begun to fester in secret. He saw Arben as both a mentor and an obstacle, someone standing between him and ultimate control of the operation. Luen started making clandestine deals with rival gangs, sharing information about shipments, collection points, and weak spots in Arben's organization. If discovered, this betrayal could dismantle the empire Arben had built with careful planning and ruthless efficiency. Arben, however, was not blind. He had learned to read people over years of survival in the criminal underworld. Subtle inconsistencies in Luan's reports and unexplained absences drew his suspicion. Instead of acting immediately, Arben decided to observe, collecting evidence quietly to understand the depth of the betrayal. He installed additional surveillance and relied on loyal lieutenants to monitor Luan's activities without alerting him. Arben knew that a premature reaction could alert Luan, giving him time to escape or retaliate. Patience, he understood, was as lethal a weapon as any. Weeks passed, and the tension in the organization became palpable. Luan believed he was moving undetected, confident that Arben trusted him implicitly, but every phone call, every clandestine meeting, and every intercepted message fed into Arben's growing understanding of the plot against him. It became clear that Luan intended to stage a coup, using the rival gangs he had secretly aligned with to weaken Arben's position and seize control. The realization hit hard. This was not just disloyalty, it was an existential threat to everything Arben had built. Arben's response was meticulous. He began laying a trap designed to expose Luan's betrayal and eliminate him without risking collateral damage. Lured by false information, Luan was led into a situation where he could be confronted decisively. On a cold night in Brooklyn, Luan's hidden alliances were revealed as Arben's loyal operatives moved in with precision. The betrayal ended swiftly, leaving no doubt about the consequences of disloyalty. Luan was removed from the equation, his fall both brutal and symbolic. The action sent a clear message to the rest of the organization. Loyalty was mandatory, and treachery would be met with absolute finality. The aftermath solidified Arben's reputation as a leader who combined intelligence with ruthless authority. Fear of him grew alongside respect. Those who might have questioned his decisions now understood that Arben was not only capable of anticipating threats, but also capable of punishing them in ways that were both strategic and terrifying. At the same time, the empire continued to expand. Arben had learned an invaluable lesson: power was fragile, and even the closest allies could become dangerous enemies. In the shadows, whispers of the betrayal and its resolution circulated, enhancing Arben's mystique. He had survived one of the most dangerous internal threats imaginable, and in doing so reinforced his control over the Albanian Mafia in the United States. But the victory came with a subtle warning. Trust was scarce, danger was constant, and in the world Arben ruled, the line between loyalty and betrayal was thinner than ever. His empire was secure for now, but the underworld was an unpredictable place, and new challenges were already forming on the horizon. By 2008, Arben Kola's empire had grown into a sprawling network of illegal operations, stretching across multiple boroughs and even reaching into neighboring states. With control over drug trafficking, loan sharking, and underground gambling, he had become one of the most influential figures in New York's criminal underworld. Yet, as his power increased, so did the attention from law enforcement. Federal agencies were quietly building cases, watching from a distance, trying to piece together the puzzle of who was orchestrating the escalating crimes. Arben knew the risks. In the world he operated, a single misstep could unravel years of careful planning. Arben had always been cautious, but the growing scrutiny made him even more meticulous. He began using fake identities, offshore accounts, and shell companies to shield his operations from prying eyes. Each transaction, each meeting, and each deal was layered with secrecy. His trusted lieutenants carried out most of the visible work, leaving Arben insulated from direct involvement. This separation was deliberate, a strategy that ensured that even if law enforcement caught minor players, they could not trace the activities back to the man at the center. Arben understood the game better than anyone. The closer he remained to the shadows, the safer and stronger he would be. Despite these precautions, cracks began to appear within the organization. The constant pressure of operating under surveillance created tension among some members. A few began to doubt their safety and loyalty, whispering fears of being caught or betrayed. Arben recognized the signs early. He reinforced loyalty with rewards, subtle warnings, and a constant reminder that betrayal or carelessness would have consequences. Even as fear circulated, his control over the network remained firm. He balanced intimidation with incentive, knowing that an empire built on fear alone would eventually collapse. Arben also had to navigate the unexpected challenges posed by rival gangs. While he had eliminated or absorbed most threats in New York, new players were always emerging, seeking a piece of the lucrative operations he controlled. Each rival move required careful strategy. Arben was not a man of impulse. He analyzed patterns, predicted reactions, and used misinformation to mislead opponents. While law enforcement tried to close in on him, he used rival gang activity as a distraction, diverting attention away from his most critical operation. His mind worked like a chessboard, with each piece carefully moved to secure his position. Even as pressure mounted, Arben's reputation grew. In whispers and rumors, people spoke of a man who was untouchable, intelligent, and ruthlessly efficient. Law enforcement could not catch him, rivals feared him, and his own organization operated with precision. But the constant surveillance, the threat of informants, and the knowledge that one mistake could end everything weighed heavily on him. Every decision became a careful calculation, every action measured to maintain power and avoid exposure. By the end of this period, it was clear that Arben Kola had become a master of both crime and survival. The stakes had never been higher, yet he remained ahead of the game. His empire thrived in secrecy, protected by intelligence, loyalty, and strategic ruthlessness. But the pressures of the law, the unpredictability of human behavior, and the constant threat of betrayal reminded him that control in the underworld was fragile. For Arben, every day was a battle to maintain dominance while keeping the authorities and enemies at bay. A delicate balance that required cunning, patience, and nerves of steel. In the dangerous world of organized crime, allies could become enemies in an instant, and enemies could sometimes become the key to survival. By 2010, Arben Kola had established his dominance over the Albanian Mafia in New York and neighboring states. But the constant pressure from law enforcement and rival gangs created unpredictable challenges. One unexpected development would test his strategic genius and alter the balance of power in ways no one could have anticipated. An FBI informant embedded within a rival gang had been quietly observing Arben's operations. Unlike other agents who sought to bring him down, this individual feared the ruthlessness of Arben's rivals more than the law. The informant realized that exposure or betrayal by the other gangs could put his life at risk. Through a series of covert communications, he began feeding Arben intelligence about rival movements, plans, and vulnerabilities. The situation was delicate. Arben had to determine if the information was trustworthy without revealing his awareness or jeopardizing the informant's position. Arben's mind worked quickly, analyzing patterns and testing the credibility of the intelligence. Each piece of information he received was verified through observation and cross-checked with his network of loyal lieutenants. Slowly, he realized that the informant could be leveraged as an asset, a way to neutralize threats before they became dangerous. This revelation gave him an unexpected advantage. For the first time, Arben had insider access to the plans of rival gangs without risking exposure of his own operations. With this newfound intelligence, Arben orchestrated a series of calculated strikes that dismantled several rival operations in New Jersey and Pennsylvania. Shipments were intercepted, key figures were neutralized, and alliances were disrupted. Each move was precise, leaving law enforcement confused and rivals in disarray. It was a masterclass in strategy, using information as a weapon more powerful than brute force. Those who had underestimated Arben now began to realize that he was not just a criminal mastermind, but a strategist who anticipated moves before they happened. The relationship with the informant required careful management. Arben ensured that the individual remained protected, knowing that any exposure could compromise both their safety and the success of the operations. Through subtle guidance and indirect commands, he turned the informant's position within the rival gang into a permanent advantage. Every piece of intelligence was used to manipulate rival factions, creating discord, fear, and vulnerability without ever revealing Arben's presence. By the end of this period, Arben had solidified his reputation as untouchable. His empire expanded, rival networks crumbled, and whispers of his cunning spread throughout the underworld. Few could imagine how much of his success depended on the shadowy guidance of an unlikely ally within law enforcement. Arben had turned a potential threat into a strategic advantage, proving that intelligence, patience, and ruthlessness were the cornerstones of power in the criminal world. Yet, despite the victories, Arben remained vigilant. Trust was scarce, danger was constant, and the underworld was full of unpredictable variables. He understood that every advantage came with risk, and that the line between survival and destruction was thin. But for now, with the informant's secret assistance, Arben Kola moved closer to becoming the most powerful and feared Albanian Mafia leader in the United States, a shadow over the streets that no one dared challenge. Arben Kola had built an empire in the shadows, controlling vast networks of crime with intelligence, patience, and ruthlessness. Yet, despite his careful planning, there were vulnerabilities he could not control. One of the most dangerous was his own family. Few knew that Arben had a younger sister, Elda, who had remained in Albania, hidden from the criminal world he now dominated. She had grown up with him, but had always resisted the life of crime that had consumed Arben. Her presence in his life had been a secret he guarded fiercely, believing that knowledge of her existence could be exploited by enemies. Everything changed when Elda unexpectedly arrived in New York. She had fled Albania, seeking a fresh start, unaware of the dangers that surrounded her brother. Her arrival created a vulnerability that Arben could not ignore. Rival gangs, always seeking leverage against him, learned of her presence through informal channels. Within days, whispers of her movements reached the wrong ears. One night, a violent group ambushed Elda, abducting her with the intention of using her as bait to lure Arben into a trap. The news reached him swiftly, and for the first time in years, Arben felt the intensity of fear directed at someone he loved rather than at his empire. Arben's response was swift and calculated. He did not panic. Years of navigating the criminal underworld had honed his instincts, and he immediately began gathering intelligence on the kidnappers. Using surveillance, informants, and loyal operatives, he traced every clue, building a detailed picture of the enemy's plans. He knew that a hasty move could cost his sister her life, so he devised a high-risk operation that required precision, timing, and absolute secrecy. Under the cover of night, Arben executed the rescue. His operatives moved like shadows, silently neutralizing the guards and securing escape routes. Arben personally oversaw the operation, coordinating every step with meticulous attention. The kidnappers were eliminated or captured, and Elda was brought to safety, without harm. The entire event, though dangerous and tense, showcased the ruthless efficiency and strategic genius that had defined Arben's rise. It was not just a rescue, it was a statement. The aftermath of the kidnapping had far-reaching consequences. Rival gangs understood that Arben Kola would go to any lengths to protect his own, and that crossing him could have fatal consequences. Elda's arrival, once a potential liability, now reinforced the fear and respect surrounding Arben. Yet the incident also reminded him of a harsh truth. Personal connections could become vulnerabilities in a world built on betrayal, greed, and violence. Even the most carefully constructed empire could be threatened by forces outside his control. Despite the danger and tension, Arben's control over his organization remained unshaken. His ability to balance personal loyalty with strategic ruthlessness strengthened his mystique. The streets spoke in hushed tones of the Albanian Mafia leader who was not only feared for his power, but also revered for his unwavering commitment to family. The kidnapping had been a test, and Arben had passed with precision, but he knew that the underworld never rested, and that tomorrow would bring new threats, new challenges, and the constant need for vigilance. By 2015, Arben Kola had become more than just a gang leader. He had had a legend in the shadows of the American underworld. His empire stretched across multiple states, controlling drugs, gambling, protection rackets, and money laundering. Rivals feared him, law enforcement struggled to catch him, and even within his own ranks, loyalty was tempered by awe and respect. Arben's name was whispered in conversations where no one dared speak it aloud, a symbol of intelligence, ruthlessness, and unflinching control. His rise from an unknown Albanian immigrant to the most powerful mafia figure on the East Coast was complete. But the story of his legacy was still being written. What set Arben apart from other crime lords was his ability to operate in the shadows while maintaining absolute dominance. He rarely appeared in public, and his face was known to very few. Every operation, every shipment, and every transaction was meticulously planned and insulated, leaving no direct evidence that could tie him to the crimes. He was a ghost in a city that never slept, a shadow that influenced every corner of the underworld without being seen. While others relied on intimidation or brute force, Arben relied on intelligence, patience, and strategic alliances. His empire functioned like a well-oiled machine, with lieutenants executing his orders with precision and fear of consequences for failure. Despite his power, Arben remained cautious. The underworld was unpredictable, and loyalty was fragile. Even trusted allies could become threats, and law enforcement was always a step behind. Yet, Arben had learned to anticipate every move. He had transformed potential vulnerabilities into strengths, using betrayal, rivalries, and even law enforcement pressure to reinforce his control. Each obstacle only strengthened his empire and enhanced his reputation. Those who attempted to challenge him rarely survived the consequences. Arben's influence extended beyond the streets. Corrupt businessmen, politicians, and even law enforcement officials unknowingly became part of his network. His reach was subtle but powerful, and his ability to manipulate systems while remaining unseen made him nearly untouchable. Rumors of his intelligence, ruthlessness, and unpredictability circulated widely, creating a mystique that kept potential enemies at bay. No one knew exactly how much power he wielded, and that uncertainty was a tool Arben used to maintain control. Even in private moments, Arben remained vigilant. He understood that an empire built on crime was never completely secure, and that every advantage carried risk. Yet, he also recognized that fear, respect, and loyalty were the pillars of his dominance. Those who had once doubted him now acknowledged that Arben Kola was more than a man. He was a symbol of power, a force that could not be ignored. His story became one of legend, a reminder that intelligence, strategy, and ruthless determination could build an empire far beyond what others imagined. As the years passed, Arben's name became synonymous with control, secrecy, and dominance. The Albanian Mafia in the United States had found a leader who was patient, calculating, and unstoppable. Arben Kola's rise was a testament to his skill, his fearlessness, and his unyielding ambition. In the end, he was not just a criminal, he was a shadow over the streets, an untouchable figure whose influence would be felt for decades. His empire endured, his reputation remained unchallenged, and his legacy as the most feared and respected Albanian mafia leader in America was cemented forever.